Hi, I'm Lance Wallnau, and the reason I'm making this broadcast right now is because a number of people have been listening to me on various podcasts and on interviews, and people are asking questions about what's going on right now, particularly in the Christian community where, like I'm in Texas, there's a number of people that are very distressed about the results of Ted Cruz stepping down. It wasn't so much a John Kasich response, going on in my constituency, but a number of people are like forlorn, demographically. The Cruz people are some of the most ardent, strongest, evangelical, Republican, church-going, tithing, praying believers in America. A number of my friends who are prophets and preachers were having a real problem with Donald Trump all along because obviously Mr. Trump is not the evangelical candidate in terms of like one of us. And even in his running, you could tell that he was reaching out to the evangelical community, but when he's asked about his personal salvation experience, he talked about, well, I take my little cracker and I do this and that. It's like, it's amazing that he actually has succeeded in penetrating the evangelical mindset. And for Trump supporters, they're aghast that Christians are supporting Trump and have been not getting behind 100% in solidarity with Ted Cruz. And I've been reading articles of the most ridiculous things. It's like some kind of a therapeutic venting going on with journalists that are saying, now you've made your choice and you've made your disastrous choice. You've chosen Egypt over Mount Zion. You've chosen Barabbas over Jesus. Now you watch what you get and America's under judgment. And it's like really nutty. And so I want to speak as a voice of reason. Why have I been saying, when there was 15 people running and Donald Trump was one of them, why have I been saying all along that Trump is the guy that God's going to use? And I'll tell you why. Because I study certain theorems about cultural transformation in history. And I'm convinced that where we are entering right now is the birth of a chaotic age. The fingerprints have been there all along. The chaotic age basically is the characteristic is it's two words that come together and they make one concept: chaos and order. When you have chaos, like economic meltdown, the rise of militant Islam, the emergence of the LGBT agenda on steroids, going way beyond where even the LGBT community thought they'd ever go with the Supreme Court win, and the White House bathed in rainbow colors. I mean, to Christians, this is clearly like signs of the end and the Antichrist. Then you're looking for someone to deliver, and it's going to be, my God, here's a Christian conservative, constitutional conservative, and all that energy and expectation was on Ted Cruz, and now the angst is, he stepped out. What doth this mean? I'll tell you what it means, and this is going to go down a little bit like a rat sandwich for some people. It means that the tendency of Cruz's unelectability in the Northeast particularly, showing the results with Mr. Trump, tells you that he probably would not win a general election. I know that Christians out there are saying, if every Christian would vote, yeah, I know. If every Christian would evangelize, if every Christian would get on a school board, the reality is in the general election, we are so fragmented as a Christian community, we are so not working together that historically, the African-American brothers that I work with, by the way, on Trump's team, will tell you that the African-American community by and large voted for President Obama. And I can make a real case right now on how President Obama and the progressives are the architects behind the deficit and behind the decay of American social values. But for the African-American community, my gosh, what are they going to do? The Republicans have written them off, and the Democrats have, closest thing they can do is get an African-American elected. And I'll tell you something, statistically, in every area that Barack Obama is measured, he actually failed the African-American community. So they're now turning around and saying, maybe there's a businessman like Trump we can get behind. And so those are the guys that got me involved with Mr. Trump, the African-American Republicans, the guys that are crossing over from the Democratic Party saying, we're looking for a solution. I don't think Mr. Cruz, listen, if anything, I always tell people, if he would win, I would be so happy because his father, Raphael, has preached in the church I go to. Matter of fact, he's like a part member of the church I'm in Dallas, Texas, which, by the way, is the most integrated church in the South. Raphael Cruz is an absolute enthusiast of the seven mountain concept. And so therefore, Ted totally gets seven mountains. And in my dream state, it's like, oh, wouldn't it be great if he was president? But I just think that he would not have been president. I think Trump can do it. And I think that God is in his own way doing something for a chaotic future. When I look at America in the next 8 months, by the way, there's a prophecy, if you guys are into the prophetic, from Chuck Pierce that says that as of the Passover that just happened until October 10th, an era of unprecedented chaos is coming to North America. And if you look at the dates, 160 years, like we haven't seen in 160 years. You go back, he's talking about the Civil War. I believe that there is going to be a period of chaos out of which a potential new order is going to emerge. But when I talk about a new order, I'm not talking about a one world order. I'm talking about out of the chaos, an organizational restructuring is going to happen in America. It could be economic. It certainly can be social in many ways if the church moves as one. Now, this is the moment the church needs to rise up. The idea that Mr. Trump is some kind of an antichrist figure, some kind of a billionaire womanizing, blowhard bully, I want to just puncture that concept immediately by pointing out something that's a historical fact. When God wants to move in history, he doesn't always pick the favorite evangelical. I want to remind you that since Chuck Pierce is likening this period coming up to being like it was, we haven't seen this in 160 years, he's talking about Lincoln. He's talking about the Civil War. Lincoln did not go into Washington as a darling of the evangelists. I'm a student of revival history. Charles Finney was probably the dominant revivalist of his time, and Lincoln did not attend any church. I mean, imagine, this was in a period of time when piety and revival was a lot stronger in American culture than right now. And this man made the audacious statement that he didn't belong to any church. When he found a church that actually practiced what Jesus taught, he would join it. So he was like anathema to evangelicals back then. Yet he got elected. I think it was on the fourth ballot, kind of like in a contested convention, like we were almost going into, in the Republican Party. But something happened to Lincoln in the crucible of the Civil War that I think tells us that God was doing something almost in a prophetic statement. And the man that went in, who was chosen to go in, he was a Cyrus for the crucible of American history. I think Donald Trump will have an experience with God. I think we have an awful lot of unanswered prayer over Barack Obama and George Bush. I mean, for years, I'm part of that praying tribe, prophesying, acts of reconciliation, prophetic acts. It's almost to the point where you get fatigued saying, well, when is this actually going to affect? And then, of course, culminating with Ted Cruz for a lot of people, it's like, oh, I just quit. So I want to speak to you right now. Those prayers have not been unanswered. I think that God's moving in a most peculiar way. And I think that there's this great, massive, cumulus cloud of intercession that has been stored up over the United States, just like when Elijah prayed and sent his servant out and said, go 7 times. We didn't see the answer in right away, but I think all that prayer has been stored up, and I think God is doing an unusual work. When has God ever done what we expected him to do anyway? When has Jesus ever been your predictable 1, 2, 3, 4 is the next thing? God always goes 1, 7, B, 5, Z, stars, moon, alligator, whatever. God does his own thing. So I think that Donald Trump is the chaos candidate. That's what Jeb Bush called him that. I think he's right. He's built like a Churchill for what's happening. Another example in history of somebody who would not be the darling. Smith Wigglesworth, I guarantee, wasn't saying, Winston's our man. But why? Because he got a cigar smoking, watered down scotch drinking, bloviating, egotistical aristocrat who made some historically terrible moves in terms of his personal history, in military matters, and in some of his philosophy about the English Empire. But God, in retrospect, chose Churchill the same way Lincoln was chosen. Always in retrospect, never in the eyes of evangelicals in their generation, but afterward, when we look back and we go, wait a second, what is a Cyrus? What is it when a Churchill shows up? These fall into the category of what Chuck Colson taught me years ago, was a reformer concept called common grace. Common grace is when God's hand is on unsaved people in order to instill the values and principles of heaven into them and through them to administrate the kingdom. If the only restraining force against the devil was evangelicals, well, the world would have been swallowed up in darkness a long time ago. Remember, Jesus said, fear not, little flock. We don't have enough of us around to police the social order. So God quickens the conscience of secular people to affirm what is true and to resist what is evil. Therefore, God has raised up people like FDR and Churchill and Lincoln, people who you could say, well, I don't really think they were born again. Well, maybe they weren't. I mean, I think an argument can be made maybe that Lincoln ended up getting saved, but even that is a sermon series by James Kennedy, I heard, based on the fact that he gave his heart to Jesus around the time of Gettysburg, but he didn't go into Washington as a Christian. He did end up becoming the most Bible-quoting president we've ever had. But that's the point. When America goes into a crucible, that's when God is answering the prayers of the nation. But God didn't answer the prayers that we had by avoiding a civil war. He answered it in the midst of that war. And in a sense, I would say that the United States has been a spoiled child, so abundantly blessed and so conspicuously rebellious that it could be a kindness of God that he's giving us a Cyrus instead of a darling evangelical who, by the way, no one's thought of this, had Ted Cruz, by some unusual phenomena, suddenly swayed the nation into conservative righteous values and overcame Hillary, as the theoretic election of Cruz was supposed to prove. Suppose he was president. You don't think the left, having come so close to victory, will not be so poised and mobilized and ready to pounce on anything that a Christian president does that looks like it's favoring the Christian community? The truth of the matter is, there was already, like on the Drudge Report and various other, right-leaning oracles, an attack on dominionist Christianity. I mean, I was glad my name wasn't mentioned because I never wrote any books on the Seven Mountains. But right away, the left is looking. I mean, they are crawling all over. They track me all the time. Primarily, whenever I leave the church realm and go into government, media, education. If I speak at Harvard, if I talk in a Washington meeting, bam! People for the American Ways, they're right-wing, seek and destroy people are right on me. Why? Because they look at Christians like me as dominionists, trying to impose some kind of a Christian Taliban on everyone. And so I guarantee that if Cruz could have been president, there would have been no help to the Christian cause, not the way you think it would have been. It would have been a reaction every time he twitched in that direction. Donald Trump, on the other hand, even the Pope questions this guy's Christianity. I mean, so you don't have a guy here who is the darling of evangelicals, obviously, nor is he somebody that people think, well, I think he's secretly trying to get Christianity in charge. No, if anything, it's like, the super ultra conservative Christians are aghast that Christians aren't all voting for Cruz and that they aren't against Trump. But I'm telling you something, Donald Trump is the Cyrus. And I don't want to go on and on. I just want to encourage you. I want to speak to you right now. Share this with your friends. Donald Trump is a common grace Cyrus. The Lord spoke to me when he first started talking, and I said, you know what? This guy is, he's like a kamikaze candidate. It was early on with his gaffes with John McCain. I called my friends and I said, you got to watch him. Trump is so entertaining. He is breaking every rule in the political playbook. I don't think he'll last a week. Then I started watching him. It's almost like the agents in the Matrix, when you shoot them and they come down and they stand back up again. It's like, what the heck's going on here? Donald Trump would get back, first of all, he shoots himself and then he gets back up. That's the fascinating thing. And I'm watching with McCain and I'm watching him gaffe again and again and I'm seeing his statistics go up and I said, wait a second. If I check in, not in my head, but if I check in my heart, there's a joy I'm feeling. And then the Lord spoke to me. And this is, I didn't know how far Trump was going to go yet. The first thing I heard about him, and I'm not one of those guys that always hears God. I'm not one of those, I'm not mocking it, or knocking it, but there's people that I think they hear God. If God was talking to them as much as they think God's talking to them, I think the Lord should follow them because they're hearing from heaven more than anybody I've ever heard. But I don't hear God like that. But I did hear this. Donald Trump is a wrecking ball to the spirit of political correctness. And I thought it was the funniest thing I ever heard. I heard it right before some of my African-American leader friends took me down to a Trump rally in Atlanta. They wanted me to go just meet him or listen to him. And I went down and I'm standing with them and they're all these great black preachers. And by the way, white preachers don't know how to dress compared to black preachers. These guys were like, they are so decked out. I felt self-conscious. I had my little Hugo Boss suit. I always look like a Jewish accountant, when I go to these places. And I'm part Jewish, that's why I say that. And I'm standing with all my African-American friends, and some TV crew comes in, and they're like doing this thing, and I don't know, whether they're doing some Atlanta TV program. And what do? They called me over to stand with these guys when they're preaching. They called me over. This guy's so silly because they introduced me. Here's how they introduced me. They go, and by the way, we have someone with us today who is Mr. Trump's number 2 guy. He is the man in charge of Trump Enterprises, his personal attorney and confidant, Michael Cohen. And they hand me the microphone, and I realized live on television, It's like a Seinfeld moment. I'm going, I'm not Michael Cohen. I met him, but I'm not him. And it's like, what the, say something. It's like, Donald Trump is a wrecking ball of the spirit of political correctness. That's the only thing I could think of. It's the only thing I knew about him. All the African-American preachers are going, yeah, that's right. That's what he... And it's like you can see, like they're all getting updated on who Donald Trump is. And I'm thinking, thank you. Why hand the microphone back? I go walking off. I go, why do I get into these stupid situations? Trump comes in like a whirlwind, shaking everyone's hand. He pretty much ignores me because he's trying to really build a rapport with the African-American community. And it's like, who's me? So he goes right past me. But I had just done my, Donald Trump's a wrecking ball. So when that event was over, I said, that's about all I know about Trump. I don't know what God's going to do with him, but I think he serves a purpose of a wrecking ball. And really he's rearranged the dialogue. Here's Trump's gift to Christians, so don't miss this. Backbone. He's here to give you the courage to be able to own your own opinions. And I'll tell you something, if the church would get its head together, we ought to unify behind him, knowing he's a Cyrus. He's not Billy Graham. He's not going to be our champion for social issues, and frankly, no president should be doing the job that the church should be doing anyway on social issues. We should be changing our game, and we should be far more influential than we are, and we should be far more whimsical and witty and engaging, and we ought to speak, like Daniel in Babylon or Joseph in Egypt. Joseph dressed like an Egyptian. He walked like an Egyptian. His own brothers didn't even know that it was their Hebrew family member. And I think what we have to learn how to do is we have to learn how to think like Babylonians, or basically we have to learn how to talk like Babylonians but think like Hebrews. We need to learn how to go out and come in from Egypt and without losing our Christian savvy. But we need to learn how to engage the secular culture in their own language. The Trump chapter for me would have ended, except that I was talking to my friend, the pastor, what's his name, Darrell Wilson, the guy that got me involved with Trump in the first place. And what happened was, he said to me after Atlanta, he said, I want you to come up to New York. We're going to have a meeting of the African-American community. And I'm thinking, this is like right after the Black Lives Matter incident with Trump, where there was people getting beat up and fighting. And I thought, of all the disastrous timing. And I said, he said, we're going to have a minority meeting. I said, well, you don't need a white guy for a minority meeting. He said, yeah, but you're a future minority. Well, with that argument, who could argue with him? So I went up to Trump Towers. This is my third meeting with Mr. Trump. But before I went, I said, Darrell, I had this strange experience. I was looking at Trump talking on television. I remember I got the wrecking ball word. And I actually believe the Lord gave me another word for him. And the word I got was that I saw a PowerPoint of Donald Trump sitting at a desk, and it said 45th President of the United States. Bam, and it hit me. And so how does God talk to you? I don't know how God talks to you. Here's the way he talks to me. He fixes impressions on me that I can't shake. I mean, I can't tell God's voice from other voices. I just know that when God's speaking through a situation, a circumstance, a gesture, a look, a moment, a movie, it fixes an impression on me that I cannot shake. And I saw that picture, it like made me jolt back, and I thought, Donald Trump, 45th president. Meanwhile, Bobby Jindal is still running, and Chris Christie, and at that point we have all these Christians running. And it was like, pick a Christian, Huckabee, or Ben Carson, or, Ted Cruz, and even Kasich. And I'm looking at all those guys, and Bobby Jindal, and, all these other people. And I'm thinking, why is the next president the 45th? And I hate to admit it, but I lost track. And so it's like, So I go to, Google, and it's like, the president, Barack Obama, 40 what? And it's like, of course, 44th president. That makes the next president the 45th president. So it's like, whoa, Bush would have been like the 43rd president. So it's like, this fast, I hear Isaiah 45. And so I got to go to Isaiah 45. I check out Isaiah 45, and what does it say? Thus saith the Lord to Cyrus my anointed, before whom I am going to break open the two lead gates of Babylon. There's the breaker anointing, Cyrus my anointed. And I read down further on, for Israel, for Jacob's sake, I have raised you up, Cyrus. 200 years before the guy was born, Isaiah prophesied, a heathen king named Cyrus is going to come along. My anointing is on that outsider. But here's the key verse. Though you have not known me. And I read it. not once, but twice in the same chapter, Isaiah 45, though you do not know me. I call out Daryl, the pastor, and I go, man, I said, this is crazy, but I think that Trump is not only Cyrus, I think he's the 45th president of the United States. I think the 45th president's an Isaiah 45 guy, and I think it says here that he doesn't even know the Lord. This means common grace. He's going to be like a Churchill or a Lincoln. There's a crisis coming. There's a crucible coming in America, and this guy's going to have the peculiar requisite talent and gift capacity of innovation and creative thinking and, frankly, prophetic intuition that's going to be uncanny but perfectly adapted to the challenge of the moment. And I'm talking Pentecostal to Pentecostal. I'm not talking like, that for publication. I'm saying it now because here's what happened. I go to the meeting with the Black Lives Matter people, the African American leaders, and there's like all kinds of tension and meetings going on. I'm like one of the few white guys sitting in the corner. I'm sitting there. And Daryl, is got a relationship with Mr. Trump. And he turns to Mr. Trump, he says, Lance Wallnau, Dr. Lance, tell Mr. Trump what you told me on the phone yesterday. It was like another Seinfeld moment. It's like, that's for us. That's not for him. It's like I'm going, oh yeah. What specifically? What are you talking about? And he goes, tell him what you told me about that Cyrus thing. I thought, oh my gosh, the boardroom is too long for me to. I'm giving him those looks like sometimes people give each other. It's like he's not seeing the signals. Like I go, well. And as though it's going to make me be more confident, I reach into my briefcase. I have a Bible. Like of all the absurdities, I bring a Bible out. I put it down like Isaiah 45 said, Mr. Trump, listen. You know what? You have had an unorthodox candidacy. Wouldn't you agree that you remind me of Washington in the sense that Washington had 2 or 3 horses shot out from under him and bullet holes in his coat, but they never hit him. You're like somebody that has survived every potential catastrophic scenario of a candidate. You just walk right past it. I think it's the hand of God on you. And I was praying about this meeting, and I told Daryl, my pastor friend, that Isaiah 45 is what the Lord told me. He said that Isaiah 45 says, thus saith the Lord to Cyrus, my anointed. I believe that you're in Isaiah 45 fulfillment of what America needs right now is a Cyrus. And I think they've been raised up in history before. And frankly, the next president is the 45th president. And I believe this Isaiah 45 applies to you. Wow. Then my friend Daryl yells out the next thing. Tell everybody here, all these preachers here about common grace. Well, this is going to be awkward because now I have to say the following, which is, Mr. Trump, we know that you're not an evangelical. I mean, we know that you're like into Billy Graham, the Bible. Your mother gave you the Bible in 1955, and that you're reaching out to evangelicals. But frankly, according to this chapter here, you're not actually. Isaiah said, though he knows me not. That would mean that you're really on a journey to know who God is. You're meeting Jesus. You don't know him like the Jews knew God or like an evangelical knows Jesus. He kind of like frowned when I said it because he's not happy about that. And I thought, oh God, this is like favor right now. I'm offending the guy. But I said, but the fact of the matter is, it is irrelevant. Because God has chosen Cyrus under common grace, and I explained to all the preachers there that common grace is what God puts upon secular magistrates in government, on a judiciary, in order to rule in the direction of God's laws, even for people that don't know him personally, their conscience aligns. Donald Trump is a friend to evangelicals. He's a friend to Christians. He holds his Bible. Matter of fact, he comes into the meeting with all the African Americans. He comes to the meeting holding it up, almost like a kind of protective device. He goes, normally I carry the Bible in to meet evangelicals to let them know that my esteem for the Bible. In this case, I think I'm bringing it just for protection. I thought it was so witty of him. Anyway, so I just love the guy. I mean, I saw his heart. I see who he is. And here's what Jesus said. Like, remember how there were people that were casting out demons in Jesus' name, and the disciples were all like smug, almost like we get, like, oh, well, he's not one of us. And Jesus rebuked his own followers. He said, stop it. If somebody says that they honor me, or if somebody's speaking well of me, they're either for me or against me. If they're for me, don't be against them. This is my argument. Pardon me for saying so. And the Max Licatos and the great evangelical leaders who have, and like even like Glenn Beck and these people that have made these terse, inflexible positions of antagonism towards Donald Trump for one reason or another. If somebody is actually speaking well of Jesus and is a friend of his and is pursuing him, don't beat them up. Don't reject them. And for God's sake, well, for your sake, don't demonize them and mobilize opposition, because it just might be that they're in pursuit of God and discovering Him and honoring Him, and you're dishonoring them. And when you're doing that, you're dishonoring God's purpose. Now, I think there's a lot of people rethinking their strategy right now. I'm appealing to you that are conservative Cruz people, who, by the way, I've already said are some of the most ardent Christians in America. Could be that Mr. Cruz, Senator Cruz's greatest contribution to shaping history could be on a Supreme Court bench, not in the Oval Office. It could be that we can get more done under a Cyrus than we could under an evangelical. It might be that we will take more ground if, listen to this. Cyrus, what was Cyrus's decree? Cyrus told Nehemiah this: build the wall. I mean, I read, it's like ding, 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 ding. Trump's whole emphasis on the wall, it's a spiritual wall that has to be rebuilt in America. We have to restore the wall of spirit. We are literally in a rebuilding project. And if Chuck Pierce's prophecy is accurate, we're going to be rebuilding like Nehemiah. Daniel's prophesied in a troubled time. We are called to rebuild. We've got to work together. If we work together, like Maximus said in the arena in the movie Gladiator, if we stay together, we survive. Whatever comes through those gates, a year of turmoil, a year of riots, a year of race wars and economic wars and social upheaval and gender wars, all the chaos and cacophony that hell can pour out, we can take this country through this turbulent time if we work together. My appeal to you is that if we stay together, we survive. And how will we do it? We've got to lock our shields in the arena as one. And if we do that, we'll make it. But this president, this candidate, Donald Trump, will not make it without us. May God give him the advisors that will give him good advice. And may we not be the saboteurs of our own deliverance. Nehemiah and Ezra emerged under Cyrus. Preacher, teacher, revivalist, you're the Ezra. Social activist, politician, architect in government, business, media, arts, family, you're the Nehemiahs. Let's rebuild the wall. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, would you let me know? Just click like over here. And if you want to be notified about future broadcasts, then just click subscribe.